First off, again, I just want to say thanks for jumping in on this topic that I kind of threw out. I think is it's really relevant, right? I think I'm excited about it because I think this is something that most professional services firms feel, but very few, I think, are able to articulate it clearly. So again, just to frame this, that I think the reality is most professional services firms, they don't often struggle in today's environment with the opportunity for growth or with to grow because there's no demand, right? That's not the issue. There's a demand out there. They often struggle because I think as they grow, the operational areas of marketing, of sales and operations aren't evolving at the same speed. And nobody owns how those things kind of come together. And as you grow, I think, from my perspective, how those come together and enhance organization's ability to scale is really important. So what I guess I'd like to do is to begin to unpack this notion, right, of growth and how firms navigate it. And let's start with, where things go sideways, Chris and Kathryn. I mean, where things begin to break down. So, I think most firms, again, hit a point where they're growing, they've got clients coming in, but it starts to feel harder, to serve those clients, to continue to see that growth. So from your perspective, where do you see things begin to break first? Chris, why don't you jump first?
I think as professional services firms grow, Chad, what happens is you're doing more and more client work, and that balance between client work and business development, that seller-doer model, becomes harder and harder and harder because you're sucked into everyday client issues. You're working with your team, you're cranking out a lot more work, your revenue is higher, complexity is higher, and you just lose the time and the balance to be able to keep the pipeline going. Because what'll happen is you're doing all this, and then you're going to wake up and you've done no business development, and suddenly that growth will come to a screeching halt.
Well, and I think what happens is, in this seller doer model, you have everyone is capable of doing all of it. And so they are executing on all of it. And what happens is there's no clear ownership at that point. And so, you have a situation where there's ambiguity and that leaks directly into the client experience, which is not a good thing.
Yes. And, from my perspective, I mean, looking at it from a marketing professional trying to support the firm's growth. You mentioned, Chris, that, hey, new clients, work comes in, we're doing the work. I feel like, I look at this through a lens of structure versus activity of the volume of new clients come in. Most firms, I think, again, we've already said it, they don't have a growth problem, but I think often they have like a systems problem. There's not clarity around fundamentals like who is our ideal buyer, right? How are we positioning our work to attract the right kind of work that we want, that's profitable, that's a client that we can grow with long term? And so there's an issue with execution in terms of how they're bringing the right kind of clients in. And so, what happens is marketing is generating some level of activity. Sales is happening usually through those partners. Operations is kind of trying to keep up, right? But none of it's actually designed to work together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's a bigger disconnect than people even realize between business development or sales and marketing, especially when it comes to ideal client profile, how those leads are going to be handled, how you harness the data to really understand, good marketing qualified leads versus bad and make adjustments. It's almost like they're two separate entities, and marketing's doing its thing and business development is doing its thing.
Yes.
And they just hope it works out. They just hope it connects. And they have full faith in marketing. But a lot of times there's a disconnect, and it comes downstream when these leads are processed and these clients are onboarded. And then you discover too late that they're really not ideal.
Yes.
And marketing thought they were attracting a really great client. And then it gets to the operations level and the team's like, hey, why exactly did we agree to this? Because this is really not the work that we want to do. And marketing's like, well, I thought they were perfect. And there's just a disconnect. And I think because you lack a system and you lack documentation, then that creates all kinds of room for misinterpretation or just differences of opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, there are lots of different firms out there. Some have I guess I would say, a operating marketing function. Others maybe not quite as sophisticated. But regardless, one of the biggest signals I think I run into that a firm is kind of either outgrown its existing structure or needs more structure in place is when they can't really explain where their best opportunities are coming from or why, right? It's like the conversations I have oftentimes when I ask them that question, it's all anecdotal, right? It's we got this referral or it's referrals or we just deliver real great quality work or, this partner over here brought something in and he's kind of our rainmaker. And so there is no system behind it, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. And again, regardless of whether you're in the early stages of building that sales and marketing structure or maybe more mature, I see both sizes lack a system, right?
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. And I think there's a place where Kathryn and I connect on the operations and business development side. I think, an even bigger issue than what we just talked about, which is you can't forecast future business. You can't forecast future client acquisition. You can't count on that pipeline. Kathryn is on the other end and she's waiting for whatever's coming out of the pipeline. And I need to be able, if I'm the leader of business development in the firm, I need to be able to tell Kathryn as the leader of operations, this is how many clients we should expect to win and onboard in the next quarter. And then Kathryn can then look at capacity and look at people and look at projects and say, slow the train, Chris. We're not going to be able to take on 10 clients in Q2. We're going to have to delay some of them. Let's go back and talk to some of those clients and see if we can push them back a little bit, back to that fast growth. Very few professional firms that I have ever worked with, even the bigger ones, can accurately forecast new client acquisition.
I would agree.
They can't do it.
I would agree. Yeah.
Kathryn finds out when the engagement letter is signed, in Kathryn's position, she's like, I had no idea. Okay, let's get ready for this. And it's a scramble at that point.
And then the get ready piece is hurry up and hire. Well, and then you don't have the right systems in place for those new hires. They get thrown into chaos and it's a disaster. And so the client experience is bad. The new hire experience is bad. So you're absolutely correct that it starts with being able to forecast the sales and growth.
And as we all know, good luck trying to hire quick in this space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
there
definitely has to be a workforce plan that's kind of supporting this growth vision as well. Yeah. So great on the capacity. I mean, later on in the discussion, I think we end, if I remember, around this notion of what does a sustainable plan for, plan for sustainable growth look like? And I think capacity, I want to revisit that, but let's shift to something else I want to make sure we give plenty of time to, and it's at the center, I think, of all this oftentimes, and that's partners and principals and the bottleneck that can be created here for firms that are growing. Again, in most firms, partners and principals are really expected to do everything. We've already mentioned the seller-doer model, and so they're supposed to sell, they're supposed to deliver, they're supposed to manage the delivery, and the teams lead the teams. And I think in most firms that works until it doesn't, right? Until they get to a point where, as you stated early on, Chris, there's just not enough time in the day to keep that wheel spinning. And so let's talk about this more. Like, what problems do you both see when those partners who are carrying all the load, they finally get to a point where it's just too much?
Yeah, go ahead, Kathryn.
So sorry, Chris. So I find, it's rarely actually a workload problem. It's more of a design problem, right?
Yeah.
And as we were talking about before, the systems not being in place and not keeping up with the growth appropriately. And when every decision has to go through the founder because there are no clear ownership rights,
right,
or the partner and principal, it's, not a sustainable growth model.
Yeah.
And
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I see some really unique things. Let's say hypothetically that a firm has 10 partners. They're all expected to be rainmakers, but let's just set the record straight. They are not all rainmakers. They're not all wired to be rainmakers. Some of them are great technically, but really don't like doing business development or sales. They love the client relationships. They love the work, but they do not want to go out and hunt. They don't want to farm. They just want to be technical experts and do the work. So what happens is you'll end up with 2 or 3 rainmakers at a firm that are carrying all the load. So let's just say you want to grow 10, 20% a year. It's more and more pressure on those 2 or 3 rainmakers. You're not developing any other rainmakers at lower levels in the firm.
Yeah.
So those future partners and principals are they're being developed technically really, really well. Are they being developed to be future rainmakers? Absolutely not. Not in most cases. In some cases they are. In most cases, they're not. So I think it starts with really evaluating the DNA of your whole organization and saying, who are the rainmakers and who are the potential rainmakers and who are not rainmakers, so
Yep.
that we can better balance growth across the people that can really deliver that seller part of the seller doer model.
Yep.
And then take things off of them, go to Kathryn and say, hey, we've got a handful of rainmakers that we need to free up to go out and grab all this business because they've got these big personalities and they're in the community and they're well known. So I got to go to Kathryn and say, hey, we've got to take some pressure off these people and give them more hours back. And
Yeah.
they're not going to be billable. So that's a thing too. Like, and that becomes this
No issue.
big taboo. You got to be billable. You got to be billable. I would rather grow with the rainmakers and have everybody else bill. That's always a better equation than saying everybody has to be at 90% utilization or whatever the number is. So I've got to partner with operations to say, how can I take the load off the rainmakers, let them be rainmakers, and then ask them to coach, teach, and help other people be rainmakers, bring them into the fold as well.
Great points. Kathryn, one of the things that, I think about people and systems as they would relate to people. I often talk to firms about building a growth culture and this notion that, and Chris, you're spot on. I mean, like so many firms that I work in, it's that founder, or at least there's 2 or 3 partners that are rainmakers and have been really, it's what carried the firm from where they've been to where they are. Many of them, to make it the scenario even a little bit more scary, many of them are not far out from exiting, right? And as you said, not a lot of folks trained beneath them, but that growth culture is about this notion of like everyone has a role in growth. And even like you said it nicely, Chris, I mean, free those rainmakers up to do more of what they're really good at, but also look for opportunities to empower senior managers at the appropriate level to do what they do best that can contribute to growth. Use their technical capabilities to identify solutions to solve complex problems that come up that are beyond just the traditional compliance things you can deliver. Some are just really great at serving clients, not maybe selling new work, but serving clients. And how can they have an active role and feel accountable to helping these relationships grow through the service they deliver and keeping their ears open and listening for opportunities to maybe do more of the work they're doing or other kinds of work. And so this notion of empowering people to participate, even though they're not a rainmaker, you can still, and it's your responsibility to help the firm grow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's, the leaders in the firm that are not the partner and principal, they need to understand what they're responsible for and what they're accountable for. And it needs to be very, very clear. And then they get to feel that ownership. You hired them because you trust them for their expertise. And, whether that is serving the clients or it's technical expertise or something else, you need to let them lean into that and allow that to happen and help with the growth.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads me to, if we're talking about, the opportunity to everybody to have a role in on growth, that leads to this idea of identifying opportunities to expand services to existing clients. And Chris, we had talked before jumping on, or we shared a message before jumping on here. I know that's something that's very much kind of at the center of what you're working with firms on now. So this notion of cross-selling and how we can hopefully remove some of those silos through this. You want to give me some thoughts on that?
I think the key for any firm that's trying to figure out how to grow their existing client base is break down those silos between your service areas. In an accounting firm, you've got audit, tax, and advisory. In a design firm, you've got engineering and you've got architecture and you've got all of these different silos. And they're really good at what they do, but they really don't know what the rest of the firm is doing. And I think there needs to be a lot more collaboration between those service areas, a lot more identification of client needs. So I think about it, Chad, as a sales motion and a rediscovery process. You've onboarded the client. You're doing a couple of great things for them. They love your work. They trust you. You need to go back in and have another discovery session to talk about what else they're working on and what other pain points do they have and what's their strategy. And once you can do that, and that's a selling motion. And a lot of people are really not poised for that when they're doing the client work. They really naturally get into those kinds of conversations. So that team really needs to be trained on how do you have the right discovery sessions with your existing clients so that you can identify opportunities for serving them at a higher level. All you're trying to do is be more impactful with them and unlock all of the things that you do in your firm to help them. That's really all you're trying to do. It's not really selling. You're just solving more needs of that client.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this notion of a client service almost planning approach, or at least a methodology to try to drive more value into client relationships, 100%. I mean, and the other thing I would tell you is, you mentioned silos, and that's a real problem. Like from a marketing standpoint, this is a positioning and a structural problem, because like if you so many firms internally, they're organized around services, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
externally, the buyer doesn't think that way. They look at a firm as one firm providing hopefully an array of services that can benefit their performance. And so if your services are siloed internally, I can almost guarantee you your marketing strategy, your growth will be siloed externally, whether you realize it or not. It just falls along those lines. So every partner owns their own book. Every service line operates kind of independently, and marketing as a result just becomes fragmented as well. So it's important to kind of, as you've suggested, expand ownership, share visibility into these client relationships, share incentives to growing those relationships, and then just make sure the other thing I'll throw is just like, relationship owners, right? We need to create a culture where they allow folks to come in, right, and help expand that, and don't have that hands off my client mentality. Right.
I think it's a trust thing. There's got to be high trust across the partners that if I bring you in, you're going to continue to do even better work for the client than I'm doing. And the client's going to be even happier versus, wow, I don't want to bring you in because I've got this great relationship. If you come in and you don't do it the right way, it's going to hurt my reputation. And suddenly I'm left holding the bag because now a happy client is an unhappy client because that extra service that you gave them is not at the same level of the service that you're currently providing. The incentives is absolutely spot on and missing. So there needs to be incentives for team participation and cross-selling across those silos. And even, Kathryn, you mentioned like the senior managers, if they're involved in the sale, if they're a technical expert or they find the lead out in the market, there needs to be incentives for those people to participate in growth. And if they contribute to growth, you should be happy to pay them those incentives. And then that's going to make them even more motivated to do it again and again and again and be a full participant. And we could say that we hope everybody would do it for the quote unquote good of the firm, but that's really not the way the world works. Like people are motivated by achieving their personal goals, growing, contributing. That's how they're motivated. So you've got to bring them in and tap into that motivation and then reward them for that work, because that's above and beyond what you're asking them to do every day.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I think it's so much of that with the compensation and incentive strategy either makes or breaks like culture, whether it's competitive or collaborative. And I feel like when you set up the correct incentive structure, along with a great goal setting framework, call it an OKR, call it, whatever you want to call it, but a goal setting framework where the entire team is able to see what's going on in each siloed department so that it feels less siloed, and they all know what's going on and what each of their respective clients may need from the other departments.
Yeah.
My question for you, Kathryn, would be what I see is the data really isn't even there either on the operations side to say, where do we think the hypothetical opportunities are here for cross-selling? Like, have we harnessed the data to say, this is where the white space is across our client portfolio on hypothetically ways to serve them? We don't know yet that they need it. They may not need it, but we at least have a data set that says, here's where the growth opportunities are. And then I can collaborate with operations to say, how do we go pursue those growth opportunities? But you have to have the data first. Most professional services firms, if they have the data, they've not harnessed it.
No.
They don't have it in a easy to read. They haven't planned against it. So last thing on the topic is a firm wants to grow 5 million year over year. And I say to the firm, well, how much of that's going to come from existing client expansion and how much of it's going to come from new? And they look at me like I'm speaking Greek. They're like, it's just 5 million. It's 5 million. However we get there, it's 5 million. No, let's split it. Let's really understand how much we think we can grow existing clients. I'd rather grow 5 million with existing clients. Like, that's the most profitable growth you can possibly have. Yeah. And if we get new clients, great. But if not, it's all, we're doing it with the clients that we currently have.
And how can you expect effective marketing strategy without answering that question? You can't, right?
No,
Because what
no.
if you don't know where you're trying to drive the growth from existing or for the market? I mean, and new clients, it's impossible really to be able to deploy a strategy that works. So great point. One thing before we jump to the next one, you'd mentioned, Chris, early on around, and I love this idea of, if we've got rainmakers in the firm, a handful, let's empower them to do more of what they do well. One thing though, I want to ask you about would be, so let's say we empower those 2 or 3 partners to make it rain. In that scenario though, there could still be a gap in sales leadership. And when I say sales leadership, I mean partners are selling, but no one owns the pipeline. No one owns the process. There's, there may or may not be coaching associated with that. So and I guess in the scenario where maybe you don't have that full-time sales professional, you don't have the CGO, but you've got 2 or 3 partners that are really great rainmakers. What do you do about that lack of ownership?
I think you can solve it one of 2 simple ways. You're either going to take a partner that's most closely associated with growth and make them the de facto chief revenue officer and have all of the goals roll up and align to them. They have to have visibility to the pipeline. They have to have visibility to, performance and how the pipeline is being processed. And then they, in turn, would be working with the other principals in a one-on-one and group setting on execution of this, right? As opposed to, hey, we just hope it washes out. So I do think that there needs to be that. The other solution, and we offer this, within our broader network of sales acceleration, is hire a fractional CRO, hire somebody that knows the business, that can come in and be a leader that people can respect, because sometimes it gets sticky. I find sometimes even when they're bringing in an outside CRO, it gets a little messy because they're not a principal, they're not a partner. And then the partners say, oh, well, why should we listen to this person? But I think you need a credible leader there, and you can do it on a fractional basis that would basically run the business development for the firm and make sure that the firm stays on track to hit their number.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And those are 2 pretty straightforward options. So let's shift gears a bit. I mean, obviously, I think this partner bottleneck almost feels like to me it's a crossroads that every firm faces, but many don't stay stuck there, right? I mean, some obviously are able to overcome that and move the firm forward and scale in a more predictable way. But what I've seen is often the firms that break through this are the ones that, like we said, kind of stop thinking about growth as an activity and more as a system. So let's focus on sustainable growth, or what it would take to achieve sustainable growth for firms. And let's begin with what leadership roles or structural changes do you see making the biggest difference at firms who are looking to scale?
Oh, the very first thing I would say is defined roles, because especially when they're starting on the smaller side, like we talked about before, everyone is capable. And so people have their hands in all different parts of the puzzle, but no one truly knows who's handling what or who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what. And so start with defining roles and managing expectations and writing those down, and actually having conversations about them on a consistent basis about what are those expectations? Are we meeting them? What do we need to do to meet them? And of course, as you grow, that compensation structure that we talked about, getting that built in from the start is also very critical to make sure that everyone's in alignment with getting, growing in the same way.
Yeah. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think as you define the roles, then on the business development and growth side, you need to define the goals. And again, I run across many professional services firms that have a firm goal that is not allocated down to the partners and down below. So let's start there. Let's start with building the right firm goal. So you've got to get your mix of growth between existing clients and new clients, and tie to marketing and make sure that you're ready to go get that growth. And then which partners, which senior managers, who's going to contribute to that. And those KPIs need to be built around that. And you've really got to understand the math. And it's different by rainmaker. It's different by service area. The conversion rates are different. The average deal sizes are different. The sales cycles are different. The amount of leads you need at the top of the funnel are different. And most firms do not know that math. So let's just start with the basics. You have the role. Kathryn's helped us figure out the roles. Now let's set the goals and let's build that pipeline math so that we can walk it forward. The very last piece then, Chad, would be what I call the accountability loop, which is absolutely missing in most firms. So it's the one-on-ones and group meetings that walks those goals forward on a consistent basis with some level of accountability. Some level of accountability. It doesn't mean that that's going to be more important than client delivery. That's not what I'm saying. But if a partner is given a goal to grow $1 million and the firm is counting on that partner to deliver that $1 million in growth, then there needs to be some level of accountability, which can be tricky because they're a partner, right? They're among equals at that point. So there has to be some, back to your point about growth culture, you've got to set that we're all partners and therefore I'm not accountable to anybody else. You really have to set that aside. I'm working with an architectural firm right now. The owner is the rainmaker. And guess what? That owner has a one-on-one with the CEO to talk about the owner's growth goals. Now, do you think the owner could just say, I'm exempt from that? Like, I own the company. What are you going to do to me? Like, I own the company. Leave me alone. I'll give you whatever I'm going to give you. But the owner understands that he's wearing a sales hat. He's wearing a rainmaker hat. And there has to be accountability around that. So I love working with this firm because they really understand that and they're embracing that. And we're helping them get to more solid goals.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, awesome when you can find somebody that can wear those hats like that. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything. From my perspective, you've said it already, Chris. I mean, you've got to get clear and confident about what growth should look like for your firm, right? Over the next year plus, like you said, where's it coming from? Where do you have leadership in place to lead and help manage that growth? Where you're operationally ready? Maybe we can touch on capacity again in a moment. But then once you have that, then like I said a moment ago, I think from a system perspective, do we have clear understanding of that ideal client profile? Like you said, I mean, who are they? Are they an existing client or out there in a marketplace net new? Make sure the positioning is appropriate for that. And then we start talking about really the marketing system. What's the right channel? What's the right cadence? And then obviously having the appropriate kind of leadership or at least some leadership in place to own that marketing function, whether that be an in-house hire, an outsourced person, whatever, right? From that standpoint, I think things begin to come together.
And Chad, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You're asking all the questions. I got a question for you.
Please. Yeah.
How do you think about marketing differently for your existing client base? Because that's a little bit of a different motion, right? They're already clients. They already know who you are. They know your brand. But should you still be marketing, doing some level of marketing and education to existing clients? And then how would you do it?
Yeah. So great question. And it is unique. I mean, there's a completely different persona that you're communicating with, right? As you've stated earlier, you've got someone where you've already built up trust. There's already experience in place. And so, yeah, there's an opportunity for you here to add value to the relationship. You're not just trying to solely build visibility and credibility like you would be with a prospect. So, yeah, I think I think for a lot of our firms, as both of you know, sometimes selling can be a dirty word. So especially the notion of trying to sell to a client. And I always try to flip that on its head and try to use the word solve. Because I think at the end of the day, these principals, these partners, our managers, they love to solve problems. They love to create value and help their clients. And so I look at it as we're solving problems. And so our approach when we're trying to market or, if you will, create more visibility for all that a firm can do is education. It's being able to consistently communicate with clients via multiple channels. That could be clients that are connected with us on social media, clients who are subscribed to one of our newsletters. It certainly could be opportunities to do other educational events, whether they be seminars and webinars over the course of the calendar year. And so just trying to understand what those common issues out there that business owners are having problems solving and bringing awareness to, those services that we can offer that would create value. I think having a plan and a cadence in place to drive awareness of what we do holistically as a firm is the key. And look at it as cross-solving, right?
And I don't see, Chad, I love it.
Yeah.
I would love for that to be part of every engagement that I work with a professional services firm.
Yeah.
What you just described, I rarely see. I think that is, for the audience out there, that is a really big gap that you could easily solve with the marketing resources you have
Yep.
if you turn your attention inward on education
Yep.
and really getting your existing clients to understand the things that they're trying to solve. We might have a solution for those things. Did you
Absolutely.
know? Did you know that we even do this? I hear that all the time. I had no idea that you did that.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
that's crazy. That's crazy for a client to tell you they had no idea that you do this thing. It happens all the time. So I really think that marketing needs to play a bigger role.
100%. 100% agreed. Okay, so hey, this has been fantastic. Look, let's kind of wrap this around. One more note I wanted to make sure I tried to make in this area, and again, it ties back to what you've communicated, Chris, around capacity and planning. Again, I think one of the things that I would want folks that will, maybe be able to read the blog that comes out of this or watch a video reel is it does all tie back to planning, getting alignment on how do we want to grow? Where are we ready to grow? And you'd mentioned it earlier, Chris, and this is right in your wheelhouse too, Kathryn, I think this is where I think firms miss it. They don't align on, growth with capacity. So they either overwhelm their team or underutilize opportunity instead of actually managing both together. So if a firm is thinking about maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, if they're thinking about how to plan for growth, what do you both recommend, or do you have recommendations on where they should focus first to actually build this the right way? Again, it comes up all the time, as you both know, like when we're talking to firms, so what are your thoughts on that? Let's expand on this a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, this is a little bit broken record of me, but I really like to harp on the role clarity piece, before you hire and before you bring someone on, needing to spell out what that growth pattern looks like and what your onboarding is going to look like, and whether or not the partner or principal is still the bottleneck for everything. Like, who can you actually assign ownership to as you're making these hiring decisions? Because you can hire someone to do tasks, and that's
Right.
fine,
Right.
but it's not good. You need someone that can execute on tasks and take ownership, so that either the rainmakers can spend the time making the rain, or they can, the technical folks can spend their time on the technical pieces. Certainly role clarity would be the place to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Chris, I mean, again, when we're talking about capacity and it's how it relates to growth, I mean, I look at it as opportunity, but it's also people, process, technology, often all together, right? Where do you have the ability to grow today? What advice do you give folks that are planning for growth but don't take into account this notion of capacity?
I think you need to do a formal assessment of the sales DNA of your organization to understand who the rainmakers are, who the potential rainmakers are. How do you train, grow, and coach those rainmakers and potential rainmakers to free up capacity to sell and to unleash all of this talent, this hidden talent that you have? I mean, I was a CPA in my career. I wish I would have known early in my career that I had sales talent. I had no idea. Nobody had ever assessed me. I had no idea. They just wanted me to do tax work over and over and over again, which is super exciting, by the way. Doing tax work over and over again is super exciting. But I didn't know I had this talent inside of me. And if somebody would have told me that when I was 25, I would have been on a quicker path to the sales career that I ended up having. The last thing I would say, Chad, is you have to build a system that is repeatable and scalable, so that you're plugging in your people to this system that can just grow and grow and grow, because you have a repeatable sales process. You have your CRM operating the right way. You have your go-to-market strategy operating the right way. And you have your forecasting operating the right, with all of the KPIs and all of the data that you need to be analyzing to make better and better decisions about the pipeline and about which clients you're onboarding. I think if you can build a really strong system end to end that you're just plugging all the rainmakers and all of the people that are touching business development into, you'll gain tremendous efficiency and you can scale. Without that system, it is really, really difficult. You're going to hit the wall, and without that system, and you're going to just crash and burn because it's going to be too much. It's going to be overwhelming. So you've really got to create the right foundation, the right system. You already have systems for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
Everything in your business, you've got a system for, but you don't have a business development system. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And a lot of it is they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to build it. They've never done it before. And there's always help out there to do that. You just have to partner with somebody that can guide you through that the right way. You know where you want to go. You just need a guide that's going to be able to get you there.
Yeah, agreed. So valuable to, it's hard to, as we all know, it's kind of hard to step outside of a firm. Many of these rainmakers, that's all they've ever known. That was their first job out of college. It's crazy how that often that, they don't know what they don't know. But all right, let's this has been great. Let's close with something practical. So someone that encounters the content, right, that'll come out of this conversation is saying to themselves, hey, I can align with this. Our issue is structure, right? And I know that's a pretty broad statement, but I guess what I would be asking both of you is to say, hey, for somebody that feels like they're looking in a mirror and a lot of this sounds familiar, what's the first step that they should take?
I think you want to do two basic assessments to kind of level set. Just start there. Start with where you are, really understanding where you are. The first would be the assessment we talked about the DNA of all of your people so that you know what you have to work with. Let's start there. And you know what goals you can set with the people that you have to work with. And then I do think we talked about systems and we talked about go to market. I do think that there is a simple assessment you can do to really understand the strengths and weaknesses of your business development function so that you know what you really need to invest time and resources into, and you know what's already strong that you can leverage. So I think it's a combination of assessing your business development function in a simple way that gives you a roadmap and assessing the DNA of your team. And if you do those two things, you're going to have a lot of clarity on where you are and where you want to go. So two simple things, assess those two areas.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Kathryn, what about anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I would agree, at least from my perspective on the people side, assessing the team that you currently have for what their strengths and weaknesses are, like Chris said, so that you can plug them in the best places to get, max capacity out of them and have them contribute to growth in the way that you need them to contribute. And of course, that then makes the people operations side so much more clear. You have defined roles and functions stemming from that. And when you're hiring, when they're ready to grow, assess those people too. Like, don't forget about the new hires, start with that step.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I, great points. And, from a marketing perspective to add to this, I mean, I run into so many firms that they feel like they've been trying to grow without a plan. And so many of them their answer to that has been to just do more. And so I guess I'll start with, saying to this person, you don't fix this problem by doing more marketing. You fix it by taking a step back and asking, does our firm really have a system for growth? And if not, where is that breaking, right? Our ability to grow. And is it where you're targeting? From a marketing perspective, your positioning, how you're generating demand as a result of those, or is it conversion, right, Chris? I mean, is it how we're delivering? Because until you, again, and a lot of this can come from these assessments, I'm sure that we're talking about, but until you really get your arms around that, anything you try to add to what you're doing today just becomes noise into an environment that is not ready to scale, at least in an optimal way. I think this was a great discussion, and hopefully this gives, hopefully there's a handful of firms that can encounter this content and gives them a better lens on how to grow with less difficulty. So thanks again.